This is day 5 of the February 95 7-day retreat in Springwater. Birds are chirping whether the sun is shining or not. Although it seems at times it has something to do with sunrise, clear or with clouds, all of a sudden there's a swell of birdsong as it gets lighter. Maybe this morning we can talk about this great difficulty we all have, or seem to have, in understanding each other and ourselves. Which may generally be called the difficulty in relationship with each other, with ourselves. It's a very consuming topic in meetings, individual, group. The difficulty in understanding each other, or more encompassing the difficulty of the reactions that come in as we hear each other talk, as we're spoken to, the instantaneous reactions that come up and create a smog, as it were, throughout the organism. Confusion, non-clarity. Organs get excited, muscles stiffen. Head may throb, the senses close down with anger or sadness, frustration, not being understood. All of this expresses itself so quickly, almost instantaneously, physically. We say somebody gets on my nerves or breaks my heart. Probably lots more expressions like this referring to the physical impact, what someone says or does, verbally or in gestures, or the absence of gestures. The absence of a kindly look, or the presence of a stern or angry look on the face, the sound of the voice. But there's more to just what seems to be heard in the other. We, each one of us, bring to each other a ever-changing set of conditionings which affect our perception of each other. And we're not aware of it unless there is awareness of it. So we don't really hear or see what someone is saying. It's so evident. For many, many years I've done this, talking with people talking to me, maybe confiding in me, telling me what someone else did or said. And if there's an opportunity to check it out with that person, and I take that opportunity, it's always amazing that person reports something different. Why? Could be many reasons. Either we meet each other with our own preconceptions, and who remembers it correctly? Who perceives it accurately at the moment? It's impossible unless there's some clarity which sheds light on the prejudice that's operating and therefore goes easy in interpreting and committing to memory, not trusting the perception. That's why it's so important to get together and say, what did you mean when you said that? Did you really mean this or that? And not necessarily expect to get the so-called truth because the other person may feel doesn't want to go on record having said something that maybe he or she did say. Already feels bad about it. Doesn't go along with the image of how one sees oneself. So one says, I didn't say that. So we won't be able to clear it up. What happened yesterday or years ago or an hour ago. Unless both of us are somewhat free from needing to entertain and maintain and hold on to imagery about ourselves and each other. And for that to happen, this imagery has to be discerned as operating as we listen to ourselves and each other. That seems to be one of the most difficult things to do, or something we don't want to do, because we don't want to be confronted with how we really are, rather clinging to ideas of what we are or what the others are. And yet it gets us into misunderstanding after misunderstanding and a deep lack of true relationship. Which is at least the temporary absence or suspension of imagery about ourselves and each other. Because there's insight into it, there's awareness of it. So we get hurt. We've talked about it maybe twice already in a talk, and yet it keeps coming up in meetings. The hurt felt maybe remembered at some incident that happened years ago, and as it is remembered, it can bring up the same emotions of humiliation or anger, frustration, as when it happened. And will we look this time at what it is that is getting hurt? Are we interested? Or is the main thrust of our conditioning to blame someone else? Who did it? You did it. And I'm hurt. And I want an apology. There's nothing wrong with apologizing. It sort of maybe clears the deck, or maybe it just installs another image. One has to watch it. After the California retreat, it was a 9-day retreat. Most people had left the center, and a few of us were standing around, still talking, maybe waiting for rides. And one person, very close to me, said, and I don't remember it verbatim, "What's this business of your coming in late?" The period before the talk. "I'm really surprised at you. because you're usually so sensitive to these things. And here I just feel like a courtier waiting for the queen to enter. I was a little shocked because I hadn't seen it that way at all. And it is true I am sensitive and have been sensitive all along, not to give occasion or reason for people to feel the way this woman felt. To eliminate all exteriors, or as many as possible. Some are inevitable. So I checked around with several people and asked them, and no one confirmed that. I don't know why not, whether it was really that one didn't feel this way, didn't have that particular set of imagery, or didn't want to hurt me. Maybe feeling this way but not saying it, I don't know. One person to whom I told it, a person who had not been in the retreat, got angry almost. He said, "You can come in anytime you want to. You don't have to come in at all. You don't have to give a talk. Why don't you just love to give a talk?" So working was hard. And I realized we weren't communicating. And pressure was put out. Why do you do what other people expect you to do, etc.? So just recently I received a letter from the person who had made that remark, a letter of apology, feeling sorry for having made this remark in front of all the people at the end of a retreat where I must have been very tired. It wasn't the right time, it wasn't the right tone of voice to do it, and yet it would be something good to discuss sometime, something to bring up. It's always good to bring things up, to look at them together, not just in isolation, because in isolation, without each other's input, unless there's very strong attention or presence, imagery thrives. One set replaced by another. So can we get together like this to really discuss and lay bare what is happening? The image that is there, that has been heard, that is seen, how the other person is seen. Lay it bare without accusation, without blame, just as a communal investigation which could clear relationship and bring us all closer together. Because it's so absurd to think why it should be so difficult to understand each other, where we're all made of the same stuff. The same stardust originally, making this earth, the same minerals and elements. Each body consisting of, I don't know what the exact percentage is, 90-some odd % of water. All of us, 90%. And then some more of water, salt water, like the ocean. And all the molecules and atoms and particles, the same in you and me and everyone, and in the trees and stars, earth and water. The same intergalactic space, as it's called, between the electrons and particles, zooming around the atom. We're really not made out of water, we're made out of space. You and I, all of us, space and water, which have an astounding ability to accommodate, to adjust, to not resist. Of course, we've all had the same evolutionary history in common, each one of us. The same huge pool of DNA, genes, I don't understand the whole thing scientifically, but it makes a lot of sense that all of us have the same elemental stuff in us, built up out of it. Without food, none of us would survive. Without air, oxygen, water, we would die. All of us. It's the same for you and me, whether we're here or whether we've been here thousands of years ago. All of us came from egg and sperm getting together. All of us. And coming out from the mother body through this narrow, dark birth canal into the light of day, or the lights of the hospital room. Born of parents into the world, into a radically different environment than we came out of, all of us the same way. All of us, no matter how we are conditioned, to what patterns, temporary structures, we are all conditioned to think and talk as those around us think and talk. Different from different localities and times to others, but the same principle, the same processes. We may think that we think different from our parents or siblings or the teacher group, but where do our different thoughts come from? Very often, if there is an expressed rebellion against what were the things that were told us or the way we were brought up, we just do the opposite. Or think in opposite terms, or we read books and seek out other environments whose language and behavior to adopt, to identify with. Of course, there is this whole process of identification which we talked about earlier in the retreat, which is common to all of us. Identifying with something, and not just something, but loads of things. People, ideas, structures, religions, professions, status, children, possessions, relationships. Maybe not identifying with the idea of a separate individual, which is very much so for the Western world, but rather identifying with a group, which is then my true identity as the group. Not to stick out as an individual, but to conform to group identity. I could go on and on the whole hour and more to list all of what is so similar among all of us that from just looking at it this way, it's hard to understand why we shouldn't thoroughly, completely understand each other. Thought operates the same in me as in you. Imagery does the same whether I live here or the other end of the world. But that's where's the hook? Different images about what is true, what is right, what is good, what I am. Masquerade for the truth. And not only masquerade for the truth, but there's attachment to them and a system of defense in place to defend these opinions and ideas, identities for dear life. One has to experience it as it happens, to be struck in awe of the power of our identifications with what we think we are. We may just be a little piece in a cardboard game. Identify with that marble. I've often talked about it in talks. You know, that game Marbles, where you kick other people off with your marble, or you're kicked off. And you are that marble, and you get hurt when you're kicked off, and sort of revenge it next time you can kick someone else off. And all of oneself now, for time being, is a marble. You know, the emotions that go with it. And is that what blinds us to each other. We started out this way. All the set past assumptions, reflexes that each one of us brings, and they are different from one place to another, from one strata to another, prejudice or distort our perceptions. And not only distort, but there is a defense system in place to uphold them. Because security seems to be anchored in being our opinions and ideas and our ways with which we're often enamored. Keep it in place, protect it from someone else, or not just protect it, but want it acknowledged by someone else. Respect it. And if that respect doesn't come, or that acknowledgement of my way of being or seeing things or wanting things, if it's not acknowledged, not respected, but questioned, then we feel upset, as though an earthquake had happened. What we have held on to for being secure and in place is questioned, is not working with someone else. And internal upset manifests, which again creates smog, and we can't hear each other because of the upset of our system of how we want to be treated, how we want things to be done in this place or another place. And the defense of it, the holding on to it, and the upset when it is infringed upon, the hurt. So how can we get together, the two of us, or more of us, or all of us, here or wherever we are, in the office, in the family? I was almost going to say in a political assembly, but that's not the place usually for. That's just a place for maintaining and pushing and defending and not listening. You wouldn't get to political office if you listened to the other side. That's sad, isn't it? A dear friend in Germany who for years has organized retreats was, beside being a businessman, was a politician for many years. Right up there on top, not quite on top, he was the opposition, the government of Hamburg. Had a lot of enthusiasm for this. He was on committees for health insurance or youth movement, something sort of idealistic. And little by little over the years, he realized he couldn't carry on with this, because even if he saw that the opposition had something good to offer, he could not forego party loyalty. He had to vote with his party against what the other party suggested, even if it was good. So he laid it all down. He didn't say, how can I integrate my spiritual practice with this political activity? He saw it was impossible. Put it down. We never have talked about this. The question of integrating practice with work has come up a lot in this retreat and in every retreat. And usually we just look at how can one be one with whatever one is doing. And that's a good question. And it can work if it all makes sense what one is doing, and one loves what one is doing, and it is coherent. But if it is not, it does not make sense, it is absurd or pain-producing. Why does one continue? Not I shouldn't continue, I should put it down because somebody else did, but to question it. Take one's time with it. Carefully watching one's motives, one's need for security, one's prestige at line, maybe the earning power, how others see one, the not wanting to let go of all of that, to watch it, not to say let go of it. It doesn't work that way. Wisdom works when there is the openness of seeing what's there, not of trying to push something out of the way. That's not wisdom, that is habit, conditioned habit. So a little while ago I was saying, can we get together and try this thing out? Fresh every time we get together, every time we have a meeting, business, staff, whatever, friends, dialogue group. Every time, freshly as for the first time, see whether we can get together. And by that, I don't mean adopting other people's opinions in a polite way. Yes, I agree with you. Maybe you're right. No, but being able to listen to what everybody has to say and how he or she says it, feeling one's reaction coming up. Maybe it's already sputtered and spurted out. And hearing it in that communal setting of a shared energy of listening. It's a tremendous challenge, isn't it? On the micro level to get together, all of our different opinions and ideas and upbringings, religious conditionings and whatever all there is. Our gripes and hurts, fears, and see whether we can listen to each other in a fresh way. We discussed this yesterday afternoon. Is it possible to hear it without taking something personally? Or rather, see the personal reaction come up and watch it. Contemplate it. I don't mean by that contemplating to only think about it, but watch it, how the whole body is affected. And I've already not heard what somebody else said because it was buzzing in the head. The upset or the feeling wronged or needing to write something. Listen to the whole thing. And noticing how we do want people to be the way we want them. Don't we? Want this person to be a little bit more this way and that person a little bit more that, but not this way. No, this is really too hard to take. Because we also are critical of ourselves. We would like to be different. We would like to be able to listen. And yet we don't want to look at what we're holding on to. Or do we? Will it come into view? The impossibility of listening while there's holding on to my image? Or the barrage of images? So can we really discern clearly how we want someone else to be other than what he or she is? I was just saying he or she, and somebody told me this morning, I don't like these meetings where people always say he or she. So can one hear one's dislike? It's reflected like in a huge mirror, clear mirror. I because that smells of this or that ism. And to hear it and to question it. Not drop it. That happens on its own. Dropping comes out of wisdom, comes out of being here with what's there, unadulterated. Seeing ourselves and our preferences and tendencies, and the almost impossible difficulty of taking someone precisely as he or she is. Is that possible? Because that's all we got anyways. We don't change that easily, even though in an environment in which there is no trying to change or make each other over in images. In such an environment, rigid things come looser. Maybe because the defense system can be dismantled or dismantles itself. It's not needed. In an open environment without attack and pure exploration is not only not necessary, but it gets in the way to defend. And that's a change. Recently, someone said in a meeting, I shouldn't be saying this, because when I don't feel too good or I'm tired, I usually say stupid things. But then he proceeded to say it anyways. It was good. Good to say things right now. And watch the fear of hurting the image that I have of myself. And it is in a way a justified fear, because often what one says is carried around by others in form of memories, unfortunately. And we hurt each other that way. We remember what he said or what she did, and this is him or her now, in this limited memory made up of not all too clearly perceived imagery. So, if we meet with each other, there is a risk in saying something that it may be carried around by others. And one may be cast into a mold. But we do it anyways, even if we don't say anything. Actually, the less we say, the more there is an incentive to build images about that person who never says anything. Oh, he's probably like that. The imagination is so fertile. It just wants to create all the time out of nothing except memory and the fears or the desired projections. So is part of this being present with each other. I'm bringing it up this time because recently some people have questioned the meaning of getting together. We have, at least when I'm here in residence, we have quite a few discussions. Staff or whoever is there as a visitor, guest, volunteer can participate in these meetings. They're usually 3 in a week, on Wednesday, Thursday, and Sunday. And then someone questions it. And not everybody is into meetings, and there's no compulsion to go to meetings. There never should be a compulsion. It's not the right spirit of coming together. It should come out of an interest, seeing some meaning in it. But since it was brought up, and is constantly brought up by one person or another, what is the meaning of these meetings? That's why it sort of comes together right now to look at it. Whether it has a meaning, even if it seems so meaningless what we're all saying, and that we don't hear each other, don't seem to be getting together. Everyone off on a tangent. Not that it is like this all the time. Exaggerating. Or one argument that is often made is, oh, this is all too intellectual. That's brought up very often. Let's look at it right now. We had a retreat in January, February, where we had no talks, I was just a participant, and we had an hour and a half meeting in the afternoon every day, which had some special flavor to it because pretty much the same people met for 7 days in a row. It's a little bit different from these retreats where different people come together, although sometimes the same people here too come together. And it has some kind of a meaning to pick it up again, start freshly together again. Something builds like a trust, or I don't know what word it is, what word is appropriate. But sometimes in these meetings, someone would say, oh, what you're saying is just intellectual, addressing somebody. And it has happened all along ever since we've done this work away from a Zen center where you don't do this kind of meetings. And very often, sometimes it seems accurate, but very often it is not. So how come one person feels it's all intellectual and the other person feels, no, it's not. I'm looking, I'm listening, I'm here with what you're saying. I may not understand what you're saying, but I'm listening and I'm looking. So can one hear someone say, oh, it's all too intellectual, and wonder about it, what this all implies, and check it out? Like when this person said, you're walking in there like a queen, I had to look at it. Was that operating in any way? A feeling of being special, using special privilege or something, although other people can walk in late too. But it needs to be looked at, not just immediately defended or rejected, or getting angry over it. If that happens, smog develops, inevitably. And for the time of the anger, the clear looking is not possible. I've sometimes wondered whether if oneself is following something intellectually and not looking, not present, then it all seems intellectual. It's a possibility. Just throwing it out. And yet, why disparage intellectual understanding? It seems very meaningful and necessary to have the intellect agreeing, understanding, whatever its limitations are, and not be opposed and throw monkey wrenches in the way, which happens when the intellect does not grasp it. Then this work is handicapped. Whereas if it makes sense intellectually, there is handicap removed. And sometimes even the possibility of coming upon something that the intellect has clearly understood and maybe also clearly understands, it can't see it directly. It can only understand it in a limited way. Can the intellect see that? Can intellect see? Or does it need already something beside the intellect, some insight? of the limitations and yet significance of the intellect. Does that sound intellectual? I'm sweating, trying to make something clear that seems very clear. But I don't mind if it's understood intellectually. It has its meaning. No one can directly experience for someone else. We can only offer it, the direct experience. But it has to happen here and here and here, and it does. Maybe too short a moment. This is just use a few minutes to say a few words about this, because many complaints are arriving about quick, momentary insights, and then the thing gone, fogged over again with the old habitual patterns of irritation, upset, fogginess, confusion. What's the meaning of just having a momentary insight and then it's all gone? And one realizes one's helplessness in bringing it about, which is already the beginning of wisdom. So as with people we talked about it, why can't we for a moment leave everyone the way he or she is? The difficulty of it, and yet not impossible, when there is presence, because then we are just all one whole, whatever we are, all of us part of the whole. And in this totality of being, there are flashes of different durations, time does not matter, of insight into the whole thing. Happening here and there, like in the summertime in July, if you've been here, the whole fields are illuminated by little fireflies. They're not light all the time. I wonder whether they wonder, why aren't we light all the time? They're not. They're not worried about it. It's their way of lighting up and then darkness, lighting up and then darkness. We have to just find fault with everything, don't we? It's a different mode of being. For whatever length or duration it may last, not to find fault with anything. Not out of principle and intention, because there's nothing to find fault with. There's only what is. And that's whole. And if one can temporarily put it this way, all of us contribute to this wholeness, old and young and black and white, man and woman, violent and non-violent, wise and ignorant. Beautiful and ugly. Ever-changing whole. And seeing that whole as it is, seeing it is freedom. we will end here for today.